Welcome to a panel discussion we produced during Black History Month concerning the history of Black rights in entertainment and the music industry. We have a stellar lineup of panelists, including Jeffrey Harleston from UMG, Professor Kevin Greene from Southwestern Law School, and esteemed talent attorney Bernie Lawrence Watkins. Our discussion was co-moderated by Candace, Chesnut, and me, Cedar Boschan, at Boschan Corporation, where we focus on royalty audits and IP valuation.
My name is Candace Chesnut. I am an actress and from a family of musicians, so I know personally that the music industry is built on the work and talents of Black musicians. In my role at the forensic accounting firm Boschan Corporation, we help musicians and their heirs with royalty and intellectual property damages claims. So we have a vested interest in clients receiving their fair share and wanted to learn more about this topic from a Black history perspective. Our firm and our distinguished panelists of top entertainment attorneys welcome you to this panel discussion on Black creators' contributions, their history, rights and royalties, challenges, and what has or has not changed. I will be co-moderating this panel with the legendary royalty auditor and expert, Cedar Boschan. Ms. Boschan is the founder of Boschan Corporation and has decades of experience serving heirs, artists, and other creators in their quest for their fair share.
Thank you, Ms. Chesnut. I'd like to start by introducing our first panelist, Professor Kevin Greene. He is a tenured professor at Southwestern Law School, where he teaches advanced entertainment law. Before becoming an attorney, Professor Greene served in the armed forces. Professor Greene wrote a paper entitled Thieves in the Temple, published by Pepperdine Law Review. What historic event most inspired you to research this topic, Professor Greene?
Well, I've been an academic for over 20 years, and before that, I practiced at big Wall Street law firms and also entertainment boutiques, and I work as an expert on attorneys' cases in copyright, trademark, and right of publicity for that. And yes, I was in the U.S. Marine Corps. Hoorah! But the Pepperdine article, which I think was a 2022 article, if I'm not mistaken, was basically a culmination of work that I've been doing over the last 2 decades about African-American creators, intellectual property, and contracts. One of the things that spurred that article, The Thieves in the Temple, not the Prince for his, bravura song, Thieves in the Temple, was that the Supreme Court decided, like the year before, that registration was a requirement of being able to institute an action in federal court. And that upset me and angered me a lot because all my experiences teaches that African-American artists don't register at nearly the rate of other groups. And there were some scholars who disputed that, but I dispute their methodology on it. And so it ended up being a bloodbath for all these artists who basically had unable to enforce their rights until they got registrations. And sometimes that could mean no case at all because of the statute of limitations isn't told during that. So that was one thing. Of course, the other thing that I've been writing about and thinking about and speaking about for years, the one person that came to my mind was a guy named Barrett Strong. Barrett Strong was the artist who gave Motown their first big hit. It was a song called Money. That's What I Want. It's been covered by everybody on the planet. And we learned that Barrett Strong co-wrote the song with Berry Gordy, the founder of Motown. It was registered as such in the Copyright Office. In those days, you had to go to the Copyright Office. Can you imagine that, to do the registrations in the 1960s? Then somehow, somebody at Motown, we don't know who, went to the U.S. Copyright Office, took Barrett Strong off the copyright registration, and for 25, almost 30 years, Barrett Strong was not receiving any revenue from this, one of Motown's biggest hits, which has been covered, and everybody on this call understands how music royalties work, all the ways a song can be monetized every time it's used in the movie, in a television commercial, a play, etc. And that really got my attention. And so I did a lot of research on this issue, and it wasn't uncommon. And the thing I want to stress, because I don't want to monopolize time, is this happened again in 2016, 2017. So this is not ancient history, it's not something from back in the 60s. When Lil Wayne sued Cash Money and found out that even though it was supposed to be a joint authorship situation, the Cash Money Corporation had filed the registrations only in their name and not in Lil Wayne's name. And he only found that out because he was owed $10 million that they hadn't paid, and his lawyer did the research. So this is an ongoing, continuing issue where registration is one of the many devices in copyright law that has proved to be disadvantageous to African American artists. And I've now concluded my opening statement.
Well, thank you, Kevin. I'm sure we'll get more into the details as this conversation unfolds. I'm going to now introduce our next panelist, who originally hails from Dominica, if I'm saying that correctly, and she went to Howard University and became a very esteemed attorney representing recording artists and songwriters and producers and others in the music industry out of Atlanta. So she's on the talent side. And please welcome Bernie Lawrence Watkins. I have a question for you, Bernie. We understand that you were inspired to become an entertainment attorney as a result of your brother's unfortunate experience in business deals. Can you tell us what happened and what you learned from it?
Sure. I'll go back to my brother and I attended Howard University together, and he and another gentleman by the name of Derek Angeletti formed a group called Two Kings and a Cipher, and they had gotten a deal with a record label by the name of Bahia Entertainment, which is under Columbia Records at the time. And it was a big deal to us because, again, we were college students. And being that I was his sister, I was able to see what he was experiencing as an artist signed to a label, but not really getting the necessary support because he was a small artist. They were small artists on the label. And I was able to see firsthand how they had to do all the promo tours, driving from city to city in a van and not making any money. And also, in terms of making music videos, trying to get on MTV at the time, they were told that their videos were too Black, and that it was not something that was in line with what MTV was playing at the time. So my brother ended up losing the deal, and being that they were dropped. And I just was able to see that artists really need help. They need support. They need people who are really going to advocate for them to make sure that when deals are negotiated, certain terms aren't in the deals. So I said I wanted to go to law school. And I wanted to become that lawyer that was going to advocate for artists and artists' rights to make sure they got the best deals possible. So I'm glad to say, fast forward 25 years later, that's what I do. I really work hard on behalf of my artists and talent that I represent. I have no issues going up against the record labels, making that ask, because the only things they could say is no, right? And I just think that artists, they can't do it by themselves. They need people in their corner who are there to support them, who are going to listen to them, hear their gripes, and make sure that the deals represent the issues and the concerns that they have, so that when they sign the contracts, it's a happy medium.
Glad you were inspired to become such a righteous artist advocate. Let's go to our third panelist. Mr. Jeffrey Harleston got his start as a prosecutor in the Iran-Contra affair. And then you made a big pivot into entertainment, where I understand you were doing A&R for a while, and you worked your way up to becoming the head of legal at Universal Music Group, and that now you chair a $25 million fund. Can you tell us a little bit about that fund, such as, is the fund invested, and exactly what are those earnings used for? And then who decides where the money goes? Want to talk a little bit about the fund?
Sure. This was a fund that was started in the wake of the activities that we all witnessed in the summer of 2020 with the murder of George Floyd and several others. What we started was more than a fund. We started a task force. It's called the Task Force for Meaningful Change. And the 25 million that you're referring to is funding for that task force. Funding not to operate the task force, but funding for the task force to actually use philanthropically to support initiatives that are affecting the Black and Brown community related to music. And what's so important about it is, and what was so evident and remains evident today, but was so pointed at the time of the summer of 2020, was with all of the issues that we have in our country relating to issues of race and culture. The music business is unique in the sense that we have a very, very challenging history when it comes to African American artists, and a history that's frankly very dark, and a lot of people don't want to really necessarily confront and come to terms with. The way artists were treated certainly in the 40s and 50s and 60s, and even some ways into the 70s, particularly Black artists, were very, very, very hurtful when you look back and understand how those artists and the culture was relegated to a certain position within the music business. So that's kind of the mission that's behind the Task Force for Meaningful Change. That's what our task force is called. And the $25 million, no, it's not invested because it's there to give away. So we've been
Who donated that money?
the Universal Music Group gave the $25 million to the fund to allocate annually, and we've been allocating it about $5 million a year over the last almost 5 years. And we've tried to focus on different issues, whether it's education, whether it's housing, whether it's healthcare, and mental wellness. We did a significant unit on mental wellness and identifying individuals and organizations in those areas that are providing needed services and using the funding to support those organizations.
And so you're teaming up with like nonprofit organizations. And
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely nonprofit. Yeah, 100% nonprofits. Yes.
And they write grants or something to apply. Is that how it works? Or
sometimes they write grants. Sometimes we reach out to them and say, "Hey, we've seen the work that you're doing, and we'd like to support you and find ways to do things with you and provide ways to amplify your voice." And perhaps your efforts, and sometimes find ways to align some of the artists that we work with some of these efforts. And it's been, I think it's the key in this area, I think, is really it's kind of twofold. One is to find ways to make an impact. You're not going to be able to change the world overnight, no, but if you can make an impact that's less lasting. So looking for organizations that are not only effective but have a leadership component that will continue in time. And the other thing is to really try and address the needs that can advance the cause, so to speak, and the condition And so it's been rewarding, and it's been great to provide executives and staff within our company the opportunity to be involved in this organization, the task force, and to be able to lend their talents and understanding to really trying to make a difference.
Could you give us a specific example of an initiative that the task force funded?
Sure. There's one recently. We've been very active and supportive of Colin Kaepernick has an organization. I'm going to get it wrong, the exact name of it, but he's an organization that's working with kids, and we've done a lot. We've not only funded some activities, funded some of the operation of his organization, but also have allowed employees from our company to actually go to some of the camps that he runs and work with the kids.
Great. Well, thanks so much. I actually have more questions, but I don't want to go sideways with this conversation. So thanks for sharing that. All right, back to you, Candace.
Why have Black artists been exploited the most in the industry?
I'd like to say that Black artists are eager and excited to express themselves creatively. And music is part of what moves us. It's part of our soul, and we're inspired by sound and movements. So it's an opportunity to get ourselves out there, to get ourselves heard. So my thought is creatively, Black talent, it's really about just expressing themselves. And when a deal is offered to them, it's not always about the money, it's the opportunity to just be heard and to have a situation or be placed in a situation that could potentially take care of their families and create a legacy. And that's usually what's told to the artist. But on paper, it's something that's totally different. And unfortunately, a lot of Black artists are still signing deals without representation. So they are exploited, and it's a problem that's been ongoing for many years and still exists today.
All of those things are true. But the other truth is, of course, is the music industry is a business. And from its earliest moorings, racism kind of infected everything that happened in America, right? Every type of business. And we saw that with Black artists, I think in particular. I always say that a lot of the most pernicious music industry practices, which developed through the development of the recording industry through the 20s, all the way up to, as Jeff indicated, probably the 70s and maybe even the 80s, they were patterned on African American artists. Now, I say that because white artists and other artists of other races have also experienced exploitation in the music industry. There's a long list of white artists who've experienced that. If we get to the root of the problem which is why these practices develop, I think we can help everybody. And this is no more than an articulation of Derek Bell's interest convergence theory. Derek Bell said that in general, white people, like all people, we're all self-centered, right? Naturally. They're not going to do anything to help Black people or any other group unless they see something in it for themselves. And I think this is an amazing kind of focal point for interest convergence among musicians to see that practices that hurt one group always come back to bite other groups in the butt. And that's exactly what we've seen throughout the history of the music business. That was a little critical race theory for those of you who didn't notice.
All right. And one or many of you describe the issue of underprotection of music and dance under copyright law.
Look, one salient example in the issue of dance, of course, choreography. So choreography wasn't protected until the 1978 Copyright Act, right? It became part of the 1970s. But even after that, as they were negotiating, it took 25, 27 years to negotiate what is the 1978 Copyright Act. So it was a long time. And one of the things that the Congress said is that we don't want to protect so-called social dances. I'm 100% persuaded that they were talking about the dances that Black folks do. And this only changed a few years back when Jaquel Knight, who's the choreographer for Beyonce, and he did the Singles Ladies Dance. He was the first African American artist to get a copyright registration in a dance that was not, European oriented. That's one glaring example of how that took place. So remember, we're talking about people in the 1950s drafting the 1978 Copyright Act. They weren't thinking about Black folks. There were no Black people in the room. There probably weren't any women in the room either, by the way, as far as that goes. And so this is the history of copyright law. And on the music side, of course, one big glaring example is the compulsory license. The compulsory license states that whenever a composer releases their composition on a sound recording to the public, anybody on the planet can make their own version of that song, provided they stay faithful to the basics of the song and that they pay the composer. The compulsory license, though, was kind of turned on its head for Black artists because Black artists were generating all the creativity in rock and roll and blues and all the different genres that we uniquely created. And yet, white artists were in a position to uniquely profit because why have Howlin' Wolf do the song when we can get Elvis to do the song? We'll make a lot more money. You would think that the artists would be happy because they're getting paid for it, but they weren't. Little Richard was very angry about this in particular, that a lot of his songs were covered by white artists, and they didn't even know that he was a creator. And hopefully we get a chance to talk about this later. When we're talking about making changes, one thing that has to change is that we have no mechanism in American jurisprudence in IP that protects people's right to credit, which was another major part of this exploitation. Credit deprivation, not giving people credit for what they did. As we're now talking about a new federal right of publicity, I've been screaming wherever I can, you must include a right to credit with that. Because I've seen personally, I know you guys as attorneys have as well, the devastating impact when someone isn't credited for work that they've done. And there's no legal mechanism to address that besides a contract, which little people don't get.
What I've seen is when an artist has a hit record and there are maybe 10 writers or several writers on that composition, and that record is exploited by the record label, but there isn't proper clearance because they can't agree to the splits. Now, the record label is profiting off of the exploitation of that sound recording, but the writers can't get paid because there's an issue with the splits. And I see this happen time and time again, and that issue doesn't get resolved. And if the writers can't agree, then it's a problem. It gets held up. So how do we resolve that issue? And this is something that we're dealing with in the music industry today. And that's a huge problem.
If I may, if everybody were a Bernie Lawrence Watkins, we'd be in great shape. But what artists don't always understand is that the importance of representation. The music business is very, very complicated. It's evolved in a way over time that there's some arcane practices that continue. There's very complicated laws in terms of, as Professor Greene was just referring to, some of the application of copyright law, as Bernie was just talking about splits and how that all works. And it's one of the challenges I've seen over the years is trying to help artists understand the importance of representation and the importance of good representation, and not necessarily going to an individual because everybody else goes to that individual, but going to an individual because they understand and they're looking out for you. And it seems antithetical, but it's absolutely important and critical. And you're absolutely right, Bernie. You could be sitting it's going to be 3 a.m. when the recording session is over, and it was incredible. I mean, this record's fire. But no one, before they leave the studio, no one's sitting there going, wait a second, I was 5%, I was 7%, I was 8%. It's not, it doesn't work that way. It's like, yo, we made fire. And then the record comes out. And one thing I just want to clarify, record companies aren't taking the money that would otherwise go. It's held in abeyance, but it's never going to be released until all the parties can agree on the splits. So then you have, now, if you're someone who's a 2% writer, you got to deal with the other 98% who are, you know, you may have been a 5%, but they're going to reduce you down to 2 because you just need to get paid. And so it's very, very important for artists to understand their business, that the creative is got to be linked to the business. It's got to be linked in the round. And you have to make sure that you have good management and excellent legal representation, because it's very, very difficult to follow it all.
And Jeff,
Thank you.
those people with 10 people on the song, they're going to be hating their life 35 years from now when it's time for them to do copyright termination.
Well, yeah, because, well, by the way, it starts out with 4 people on the song, but you showed up with the sample. So now the sample's got 3 writers. So those 3 writers have to be compensated. And let's get the sample clear, because we can't go anywhere until we get the sample clear. So you're just getting reduced and you don't even know it. You may have written, the lyrics, and the sample could be in the melody, but how it's divided up, all of those are conversations that need to be had as the creative process is happening. Not always convenient given the way the process comes together, but critically important.
It's not just that it's inconvenient. I think also what I see with clients is like they just don't feel empowered to claim their fair share. They don't want to argue about it or not be chosen next time to collaborate. And so to Bernie's point, I think it's really important that they have competent counsel to guide them.
How did you gain the confidence to speak up more?
I've been in the music business for 32 years. I've seen a lot. And it's to no one's benefit for the business side not to run smoothly. It's actually to everyone's detriment. It's to no one's benefit. And, I spend a lot of time, I used to, even when I was 5 years in, when you'd be signing an artist, a new artist to a deal, and they come in and they're all excited and they're, what do I sign? And sometimes mama's with them or their homies, or maybe a boyfriend or girlfriend, whatever, and they're signing, taking pictures and all that. And I would say to them, the first thing is, what are you doing now? Oh, I've been working, I've been working for a moving company, or I work at McDonald's or whatever. And the first thing I'd say is, don't quit your day job, because the amount of time it's going to take from today until a record comes out is a really long time. Now, sometimes there are deals where an artist has done it themselves and a record is moving and they're able to realize things, more quickly. But the reality is you're going to be working really hard with little return for a long time. So, don't take your signing check and go out and buy the new car or have a big party and all that kind of stuff, because you're going to need to make that work and make it last. And, they'd always look at me and go, oh, this guy's crazy. Why are we listening to him? And then, 6-9 months later, they'd be back saying, can you help us? Can we get, an advance against our future royalties? Which, yeah, we can do that, but this is how bad feelings evolve, because now we're advancing you. So, now it's even the goal of being right-sized up in terms of your deal and being compensated for your work has been pushed even further out. And then
they call me saying like, oh, I haven't seen a dime from the record company. And it's because their account is really unrecouped, and it's because they got a lot of advances a long time ago, which maybe they forgot about. But
that's exactly right. And it's, and it's one of those things where you see how do you break the cycle? But it's very hard. But I can't express enough the importance of education. I can't express enough the importance of education. And some artists I know are so, they get it, and they're so wise at how they move, because they've understood, and maybe they've understood because they've had a bad experience, but it's one of those fool me once, you're not going to get me a second time. But it's not that, it's less about people being gamed and more about people just not knowing in most instances, at least in today's record business.
And by education, what specifically do you mean by education?
First thing I'd say is, do you know what sound exchange is? And I will tell you, 90% of them will say, no, I don't know what that is. Or I don't know, I've heard of that, but I don't trust them, or whatever, something to that effect. Sound exchange exists to provide royalties irrespective of your undercoop balance. If a dollar comes in, this is for non-interactive digital exploitation, like think Pandora, Sirius XM, digital radio, that kind of thing. So every time a dollar comes in, 50 cents goes to the artist and 50% goes to the copyright holder, and the 50% that goes to the artist goes directly to the artist. So it's not subject to any recoupment for any advances that have been taken that may have been received prior. Talk to them like, have you signed up with Sound Exchange? Have you told them? Because again, it's a little bit of self-help here. Have you told them I am artist X and these are the recordings to which I'm performer on, or that I should receive. And it's a performer royalty. It's not, that 50% is a performer royalty, not a copyright owner royalty. So that's very, very important.
This question is to Miss Lawrence Watkins. Due to an underrepresentation of female attorneys in the music industry, has it been difficult being not only a Black attorney, but a female attorney in this industry?
Yes, it has been. I'll tell you that. I had to go through my share of situations where I've been challenged, disrespected. But you keep pushing. You just can't, you have to ignore the ignorant people and don't allow them to cloud your day. And it's really about knowing who you are and what you represent, and always stand firm. And that's why it was important for me to have my own practice, because I really didn't see that coming up as an entertainment lawyer. There were few Black entertainment attorneys that I could look to, that like Louise West. Then you had Denise Brown, people like that I admired. And I said, I wanted to create a pathway for young women coming up that look like me as well. So I wanted to model my firm a certain way where I could brand myself. And, it's really about being goal oriented, knowing what you want, and making things happen for yourself. And I was just one of those women that was adamant. I was determined. I was committed. I was focused. So it, fortunately, God put the right people in my path where I was able to do the right types of deals, which gave me huge exposure. Artists like 21 Savage, who, who now owns all of his masters, owns all of his publishing, and to be able to do his deal and to see where he is today. And I'm like, knowing that I was partly responsible for that speaks volumes, because a lot of people know that I was associated with him. And I can go on and on with a number of artists and talent that I've represented. And people know me as that advocate who really will go for the gusto. I have no qualms about asking for what I believe is right and standing firm. So when people understand what you represent, they learn to respect you. And that's what it's been about for me. You don't have to like me. You're just going to respect me, because that's what I represent. I represent respect. And that's how I run my practice. And you can't deny a person who does great work. And that's what it's always been for me.
Awesome. Absolutely awesome.
Hey, can I just say something on the back of that? Because, what this woman has just said is really, really important. about the respect. Because, and I can attest as someone who has the utmost respect for Bernie Lawrence Watkins, but the, you know, it's it's hard to explain to people. But what someone said to me when I first came in the business, they said, you know, you're coming in here and all you have is your reputation. When you leave, you'll have your reputation. And I started long ago. It was and your Rolodex, but now I guess we'd say your contacts. You have your reputation and your contacts when you leave. And that has been one of the kind of divining principles for me, because I don't believe in, I'm not going to tell an artist that I can do something unless I'm absolutely 100% sure I know I can do it. People have to learn that, like, if I'm giving you my word, it's my word and my word means something. And the respect that you engender in this business is more important than anything. And as attorneys, it's really, really important, because if you become one of those individuals who's just kind of like, yeah, that's all fine, that's all fine. Where's my 15, 10%, whatever, is my fee in there? That's a different kind of lawyer. And that's I don't think that's what any of us really, ascribe to be. And that's why you see all those plaques behind Bernie. That's why they're there, because she's really carried herself in her career, and continues to carry herself with the utmost of respect and admiration.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you, Joe.
Awesome.
We've used this term masters in the music industry for many decades, and at least my firm is trying to switch to recordings or sound recordings when we refer to those recordings, which were referred to as masters before. But I mean, do you think that nomenclature is important?
Nomenclature is very important, but and I respect, if someone feels particularly strong about something that maybe I feel less strong. We all, like your company, Cedar. We have moved to sound recordings, away from the master slave distinction. There's a raging debate, certainly in the Black music community, if I dare say Black music community, or urban music community, but Black music community, about whether it's Black music, whether it's urban music, whether, and there's different, there's different reasons, for those, for that debate, and I respect all sides of it. Some people who come from radio feel, urban's really important, because they view almost like urban as a genre. Some people who come from more the A&R side, like Black. Some people, like nothing. But I do think it's important to understand, and understand where these things come from and what meanings they can carry with them. And, negative, or positive, but certainly, and I'm willing to be respectful of an individual, whether it's an artist, executive, whoever, if they feel very strongly about one term versus another.
From what I've seen, I think it pigeonholes artists. For example, you may have an artist like Justin Bieber, who sings an R&B record, but his song is not considered an R&B song and is played on pop radio. You have this another artist like say someone like Chris Brown, who will sing the same record, but his song will be limited to R&B radio stations. He doesn't have the opportunity to have his record played on pop radio stations, which in my opinion, that's a problem. And I think something really needs to be done about that, because our Black artists are being pigeonholed, and they can't make the pop charts. They're making a pop record, but it's not classified as a pop record because they're African American artists. So how do we work around those issues? I think we really need to find a way where there's a system that works for everyone.
All right. Thank you. Candace, back to you.
What is the most rewarding aspect thus far in your career?
The rewarding aspect for me is that I get to advocate for talent that don't have a voice. They're afraid to speak up, so they hire someone like me who's not. And that's a great feeling for me when I know that I can go in and advocate on behalf of my client and I may not get everything, but I try to get mostly everything that I ask for. And that's a great feeling.
Wonderful.
Are current contracts for Black artists equitable compared to those for other creators?
Well,
I'm dying to hear her answer.
I would say that you cannot be afraid to ask for more, because in my opinion, it's going to come in on the low end. And you just you get what you negotiate. You just can't be afraid to ask for more. My opinion is, if I'm advocating for someone who's white, the deal is going to come in a little different than a Black artist. Yes, I'll go on record saying that.
From a label perspective, to the extent there's variation in deals, I think it's following, in today's marketplace, it's following what's perceived to be heat. And so you can be irrespective of genre. And I'll tell you, in the last, I'd say, year and a half, 2 years, the hottest genre in terms of driving deals has been what we have come to know as regional Mexican music, right? Where, and these are, a lot of times, these are artists who have music in the marketplace that are streaming and again, we're very data driven as an industry right now, right? There's a lot of data available. So as people are seeing a certain artist performing a certain, their records performing a certain way, sometimes it's even one record performing a certain way. Everyone has the same data. And so you have a number of record companies that are vying for the same artist, which is then driving the price of the deal even higher. And there was a time when in hip hop it was, probably going back 5 years ago, hip hop was definitely in that moment. Now of late it's been regional Mexican music, and sometimes it's even pop music. But there's so much data that's driving deals, and it's easier today than it was certainly 10 years or even 20 years ago for artists to put their music into the marketplace and then seek a deal, as opposed to, the old music business was, I can't even get a record released unless I have a deal. So I view it a little bit differently.
I think we're probably asking the wrong question, because the music industry has gone through this evolution. And I wrote an article last year called Goodbye Copyright: The Rise of Trademark and Rights to Publicity Rights in the Hip Hop Music Arena. And what that article was indicating was the music business, of course, has become a streaming business primarily. Only a handful of artists at the very top can even get monetized on the streaming model. And I think many artists, and also, of course, labels, uh, or many artists say labels don't support artists like they did in terms of having longevity in their career. So if you add up all these factors, artists today understand that they're not going to make much money on the traditional record deal, which is based on the streaming model. Where they are going to make money is if they can get enough notoriety, fame, in order to have a cologne line, a clothing line, something else. And so to me, that changes the game, with so much of the focus on the inequities of the record deal. And of course, is as Jeff indicated, the old music model was certainly based on inequitable contracts. If you don't believe me, look at my work around Ruth Brown, one of the early R&B artists. That now we have to look at other ways that artists can actually get paid and make a living. Historically, that's going to be performance royalties. I mean, performing on stage and making money, and also whatever marketing branding they can do. So the brand now has become everything. And we know this has always been true for a long time. Hip hop got this early on, right? That it was about the hustle. It was about selling stuff. It was about the entrepreneurial spirit. I don't know if it was mythological or not. What's the guy's name? Too Legit to Quit. MC Hammer selling records out of the back of his trunk. And I think smart artists today, both in music and film, they recognize that they might get a better deal if they do everything themselves, and they'll have a much greater chance of monetization. So I respect the question, but I think maybe it's the wrong question to be asking in this era of streaming, right? Where it's very difficult to reach the level of streams. I was at a conference, it was USC, and it was hilarious to see all the heads of um, Apple TV and Paramount, and they were all sitting there. There was the one theme, and the music people, we're hemorrhaging money. We're hemorrhaging money. It's like, really? It seems like there's awful lot of money on that table to say it. So even they're complaining, right? The streamers on the film side are complaining. We can't make money in this model. What chance does the artist have, unless your name is Rihanna, Drake, or somebody like that?
Call to action for the future, right? What is the most productive way to address some of the issues that we have covered?
What I would really say is, Jeff talked about it early on, is education. You see how the athletes have some form of education when athletes are signed and they're recruited. They go through a series of education in terms of business management, how to manage their money and things of that nature, what they're about to encounter. I believe the entertainment industry needs something very similar. When an artist signs a deal, what should they expect? Because not every artist has representation. I think it should really be on the record label's behalf to take the step to inform the artist about the deals that they're signing, the advance that they're receiving, and what they should be expecting for maybe the next year or two or in their career, and how they should have an attorney. They need to have a business manager. They need to have a personal manager, just some form of education. And that's not something that takes place. The artist is left to try to figure it out on themselves, by themselves. And usually they're surrounded by wolves when they don't start out with representation.
I agree. I mean, it's very hard from the record label perspective. We're and Professor Greene just talked about this. We're definitely in for the record side, but we generally don't participate in touring, for example, and a lot happens in touring. And we, sometimes participate in merch, depending upon how that goes. But it's, the education component is critical and the representation component is critical. And just to be clear, we don't sign any artists unless they have legal representation. And I know that's true for every major record company and many independents. But it's the artist's legal representation, the artist's management, which is really, really challenging sometimes. I mean, someone told me once, it was a great concept. They said every artist should hire a manager that would fire the artist. Like an artist who hires a manager, if it's your cousin Pookie or somebody from Homeboy Management, like it ain't gonna work, right? Because they're going to be there. You need somebody who's going to give you tough love and tell you, and is competent enough that if you don't do things the right way, they'll leave. Instead, you have people who are enablers in many instances, in a management role, and that's not helping anybody. And I will say, some of the events that have happened in the last couple of years, and at least in the, whether you want to call it black, urban, hip hop side of the business, have been very, I think, very damaging to the business overall. Very damaging to third party businesses wanting to invest in certain genres of music, because of some of the events and perceived conduct that's been happening. So it's a challenge, and I can't emphasize enough how important education is. I think it's also not only business education, but learning how to take care of yourself. Mental wellness is a huge component with artists. Um, and it's a very tough, difficult and challenging relationship as a record company, because you're not my daddy, you're not my parents, you can't tell me what to do. So there's some of that. But it's, and they're not our employees, legally. So you can't really there aren't the same consequences that one might have if it were a different kind of workplace, where certain behaviors wouldn't be tolerated in that workplace. That doesn't apply in a record company artist relationship. But it's I look a lot at, I'm very involved in music cares, for example, and really looking for ways to provide resources for artists across the panoply of challenges that they have, not just economic, but kind of social and mental well-being.
Kevin, do you want to answer the question? But also, I know you've studied the concept of reparations more than that.
Than anybody. Than anybody. So I wrote the first reparations article way back in 2008, and I have an article that just came out in the University of Pittsburgh Law Review, which gives a 10-point plan for some of the things that we're talking about. So I think we don't have a time to go over all of that. Let me say a couple of things here. I was at BISLA back in November. BISLA is the Black Entertainment and Sports Laws Association. It was 5,000 people, however many people were there in Cabo San Lucas. It was so empowering to be around so many brilliant, talented, well-educated Black people. And everybody on almost every panel, because I asked the question, particularly in one of the panels, all that euphoria after George Floyd, all of that, wow, maybe we should take a look at things and re-examine things. According to the people I was with at BISLA, all of that is gone. So it was nice that Universal has this $25 million fund, and I respect everybody on this call. I respect Jeff, and I respect him for being here. But the truth of the matter is that will not cut it. And long term, I think everybody knows that. I think the business recognizes that as well. This is going to have to be some sort of reckoning for it. When we're talking about the streaming business and the music industry, the other thing we should talk about is that the music industry makes most of its money from old music. Old music outsells new music 2-to-1. Go look at the statistics. What does that mean? All of that old music was done under segregation. All that old music was done under conditions where the artists were not compensated. It was a pattern and practice of the music industry. And these guys, Primary Wave and all these cats who are buying up all that music, number one, most of the people who actually created that music were never paid. Number two, we know that the performers didn't get anything. So I'm doing research on doo-wop now. And I don't think any doo-wop artist ever got anything. And that is a genre that's foundational to rock and roll and everything else. But the other thing I want to say, all of that music is still being sold, is still being monetized, still being used in TV shows, in movies, in TV commercials. And every time I see a TV commercial with some old blues song or some rhythm and blues songs from the 50s or even music from the 60s and 70s, I ask myself, did the person who actually created that get paid? I'm doing a history of the Black girl groups of the 1960s. It's not looking good. Most of these women were either paid a pittance or paid nothing. And that music is timeless. It stood the test of time.
I'm curious if Jeff or you, Bernie, have any comments sort of in response to some of the things that Kevin said. As an example, I know, a lot of record companies have been doing unrecouped balance forgiveness to varying degrees. And I think there's like a Motown fund, which is separate from yours, Jeff. And so I know that record companies have been doing some things, but maybe it's to stave off the reckoning, or I don't know, kick the can down the road. But I'm curious what your thoughts are from the, other side of the table.
Yeah, I think what Kevin is saying is correct. I agree, because legendary artists have always experienced challenges getting paid. And those who have gone on and have an estate, their children are now having difficulty just trying to get paid. And that's what I've seen, where the music has been exploited, but the registrations have gone to people who they don't even know. And trying to get that cleared is a process where we're fighting to figure out how we can obtain the legal rights for the estate. And a lot of times that means you have to spend money fighting it in court. And then the families don't have it, the estates don't have it. So it's trying to figure out a better solution. How do we become solution oriented so that we can work with the legendary artists so that their families don't have those challenges? I think that's the perspective that these labels need to work from, because it's a huge problem that I see today.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if reparations, how that would all work, but some of the things that I know that at least, and I think I can speak for the other major labels as well. There's been kind of my term would be like royalty reform. I think everyone has some sort of a minimum royalty, even though it's above what the royalty was that was originally assigned to that artist. Um, and when a lot of the labels that existed, 40, 50, even, 60, 70 years ago, there were smaller labels that were subsequently gobbled up into large corporations now. So that's a challenge as well. So there's a minimum royalty in all this stuff. So there's that. And then there's, God, it has to probably be about 15 years ago, longer, maybe even almost 15 or 20 years ago. We were approached by the Rhythm and Blues Foundation, which is a very interesting organization that is still holding on, thank God, but really exists and started by Ruth Brown and others many, many years ago. But it exists for the purpose of providing financial assistance for artists from originally it was the 40s, 50s, and 60s, but now it goes, much, much more contemporary into the 2000s. And, we established a fund. You mentioned the Motown Fund. It's called the Universal Motown Fund. It's not specific to Motown, but it's for any rhythm and blues artist that is a royalty participant in any universal label, from the past to the future. And
But when you say any artist, like who is eligible?
A royalty bearing artist. So if you're a member of a group, that's fine. If you're a side person, you're not royalty bearing, you're not eligible. But this is really exists for medical assistance. If you're about to lose your house and you need a payment on your mortgage, things like that. I think
I guess, Jeff, my question to you is there something that outlines how you qualify?
Yeah, absolutely. There's documents, and what we recently did was the foundation has been hanging in there, and on the heels of the summer of 2020, Warner gave a significant, or maybe it was Sony. I take it back. I think Sony made it significant. They created a bit of a fund themselves through the R&B Foundation, and the R&B Foundation then made an agreement with the National Museum for African American Music down in Nashville, and so that's the administrative. They provide the administrative backbone for this, and I can tell you because I get requests probably 4 times a week or so from various artists that there's a very robust artist request and grant making for various issues. I mean, there's even provisions for burial and funeral related assistance and for surviving spouse assistance. But it's all available. And when we started our fund, which we call the Universal Motown Fund, at that time, Berry Gordy started in a kind of a sister fund to ours, which is called the Gwendolyn B. Gordy Fuqua Fund, and that is specifically for Motown. So there's efforts out there. Is it enough? Probably not. But it's better than nothing, and it's definitely a recognition to some degree of support for these artists, particularly as they've matured and their ability to make a living from either performing or recording music is not what it once was.
Is there somewhere we can direct viewers?
Reach out to the National Museum of African American Music. It goes by the acronym NAMAM.
And so they would have the criteria.
They have all the criteria, yeah.
Excellent. We appreciate your contributions.
I'd like to thank all of our panelists for being here to take part in this Black History Month IP and Entertainment Law panel. Thank you guys so much for your time, and thank you to the viewers